You are listening to the Reading for the Glory podcast. Join us as we have meaningful conversations that will help us discover truth, goodness, and beauty through the written word. For more information and additional resources, please visit readingfortheglory.com. This episode is brought to you by Beeson Divinity School. Beeson is an evangelical seminary at Samford University in Birmingham, Alabama, that offers a robust Master Divinity program, forming students in person in a community-oriented model of theological education. Thanks to a generous gift, Beeson is able to offer full tuition scholarships for students beginning their studies in 2026, making this flagship degree now more affordable than ever. These scholarships cover the cost of tuition and fees for 3 years, which is about the average time it takes to finish the MDiv. These scholarships won't last long, so for more information and to apply, please visit beesondivinity.com or click the link in today's show notes. Welcome back to the Reading for the Glory podcast. I'm your host, Zach Kendrick, and we're excited to have you join us today. This is our very first episode of the podcast here in the new year in 2026, and we have another great conversation coming your way. I'm excited to be joined by my friend, Pastor John Davis. John serves as the senior minister at Columbia Christian Church in Columbia, Kentucky, where he lives with his wife and his 2 kids. He holds a Master of Theological Studies from Cincinnati Bible Seminary, and he's the author of a few books: God-Centered Christianity, the Bible's Antidote for Self-Centered Religion, Seeing the Unseen God, and Mercy, Not Sacrifice. So welcome back to the Reading for the Glory podcast, John.
Absolutely an honor to be here. Thanks for asking me, man.
Absolutely. Well, this is a few years in the making podcast. Back our first iteration of the podcast in 2024, we had the idea to do a podcast on the Lord of the Rings, and we were not able to get that done a couple years ago, but I'm glad that we're going to have you back and have this conversation today.
Yep, me too, man.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. I'm going to just be up front with our audience. I'm not very deep in the Lord of the Rings. You're the expert here, so go as deep as you want to go, chase all the hobbit holes, and yeah.
Now your audience needs to know I am no Tolkien expert, okay? So just so everybody knows, I read and reread and reread Lord of the Rings all the time. I think I'm going through it for my 8th time right now.
That's
but
great.
I've never read the Silmarillion. I don't know what's in the appendices. I draw kind of a line there, and I'm not even planning to read those things. So if anybody's got like all this, all these deep facts that I'm not understanding, like I don't care, and I don't know them. I love the 3 books, The Lord of the Rings, and that's what I'm here to talk about. And all the other stuff, there are people who are experts. I'm not one of them.
Well, there you go. Well, we can tease that out as we have our conversation as it progresses. Well, before we get into our conversation, our formal conversation today, I'd like to remind our listeners, as we do each episode, to invite you to become a ministry partner with us. And we would invite you to do that in 2 ways. First is to become a prayer partner with us. We understand that no ministry can exist without prayer, so we'd invite you to pray with us and for us as we continue the work that God is leading us to do. And secondly, we'd invite you to, if you're able, to become a partner with us financially. And for anybody that can do that on a monthly basis, we'd love to send you a free book as a thank you for becoming a partner with us. And for more information about that, you can go to readingfortheglory.com/free gift. Well, John, you are no stranger to Reading for the Glory. In fact, we were talking about right before we hit record, you're one of the OGs of Reading for the Glory. And without you, we wouldn't have started the ministry in the way we have. You were one of the first contributors, and so we're glad to have you back on the podcast. And this is actually another point of trivia. This is your 4th appearance on the podcast, if I'm counting correctly, which makes you the one who has the most appearances so far as of this recording.
Wow, I need a trophy or something to put up in my office.
There you go. And another point of trivia is you hold the record for the most viewed article on the Reading for the Glory website, which is your article. Yeah, your article, A Tale of Three Kings.
Really?
And
go figure.
Yeah, it keeps getting hits.
What a book. A book.
So, so you're kind of, like I said, you are the OG of Reading for the Glory. So let's dive in today. Yeah. So speaking of your articles, couple of years ago, at the beginning of 2024, we published an article that you had originally published on your church's blog titled Why You Should Read and Reread The Lord of the Rings. And so we thought we'd have you on today to have a conversation about that and broader discussion of The Lord of the Rings.
Absolutely. Happy
All
to
right.
do it.
So I'm just going to start here. We're just going to start simple, start basic, start easy. When were you first introduced to The Lord of the Rings, and why did you read it for the first time?
Okay, so as far as I can remember, I know I watched the movies before I read the books. Um, the movies were my introduction. I remember seeing the first movie for the first time, and at the very end, when like Frodo and Sam are staring over Mordor, and it just kind of ends, I was like, "Well, that was horrible. It didn't even end. You know, there's no ending." I had no idea what the story was or where the story was going. No idea. Um, and even as the movies came out, one by one, the Return of the King came out when I was in college, and there was a rumor that the end was going to be different than it was. Like, it was just an internet rumor, but it was gaining traction, and I totally believed it. So when the actual end happened, I was surprised, and I loved that. But I had not read the books. So after the movies, I think, through the movies, I got kind of interested in the books. Maybe I should read these things. And I think also, if I remember correctly, it was Tim Keller who used to mention Lord of the Rings a decent amount in his sermons. And so I was listening to his sermons a decent amount, and he made me kind of want to get into them. So that was the start. And then I looked back. Goodreads tells me that 2012 was the first time that I read the books.
So, what was it about the storyline of the books that captivated you to read them, not just for the first time, but as you say in your article, to reread and continue to read over? You said this is your eighth read so far as of this recording, or you're in your eighth read.
Yeah.
What about the storyline kind of captured you to continue to read it over and over?
So I had never read a story like this one, and I know all kinds of people experience this, and there's probably others who can put this into words better than me. Um, you get a sense of this with the movies because they tried to stay true to Tolkien's vision, but even more so with the book, it's a lot of things. It's the manhood and the integrity and honor of Aragorn. It's the friendship of the hobbits, especially Sam to Frodo. Um, but I think maybe more than anything, it's Tolkien's vision of what goodness and virtue is. He in those books he lifted up all the things that are good and right in the world, and it always makes me go back to Psalm 19. There's a verse in Psalm 19 where it says, "The fear of the Lord is clean," in the ESV, clean, and that's what I think of when I read Lord of the Rings. This is uh, a goodness and a virtue that is clean. The people and the things you're cheering for are not like in modern movies or modern shows or stories where the protagonist has to be bombastic and in your face and prideful, and they flaunt ways that they sin even, but they're the good guys. Tolkien doesn't do it like that. He doesn't get his idea of virtue from what's popular in the culture around him. I think honestly, I think this is what so many of us Lord of the Rings fans can't swallow with the Rings of Power, that new show. The goodness and the virtue doesn't smell right. It just seems like some kind of repackaging of modern values. And that was what we so loved about the way Peter Jackson did the movies, was he wanted to just stay true to Tolkien's vision of goodness and virtue. And so you've got all of this stuff that Tolkien, he got his idea of virtue from the Bible. So it's completely unlike most other modern stories. Now, I know there's more to it than that, because you can go back and read, novels that are out of our own time, like Jane Austen novels. I've read those. Those are good, or Charles Dickens or something like that. So there's more to it than that. But that's what stands out to me the most is just his portrayal of goodness and virtue. And it's clean, and it's attractive to me. It's not, so simple that you're like, oh, sometimes modern Christian movies are annoying because of how simplistic they are, or how cheesy it is. But none of that, you don't get any of that with Tolkien. It's deep, but it's clean. And I loved that.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. But also to point out, Frodo and Sam and the protagonists of the book, they're not faultless. they're not sinless, to put it like that, but because that does come out in the story, and you see their foibles, you see their missteps, but they're not flaunting their sin like you would say in the Rings of Power, which I have not seen, but I've heard of that's one of the issues that people have with, but also even in modern movies where they flaunt their mistakes, they flaunt their brokenness.
Yeah, and I actually haven't watched Rings of Power either, but I've been turned off even by the trailers and the ads.
Yeah.
You get this sense that the good guys have this modern bombastic in your face quality to them that none of the characters in Lord of the Rings did, and even in the movies. So it's that I can't criticize the show too much because I haven't seen it, but I don't want to watch it. I have no desire. But Peter Jackson really got it right with the 3 movies that he did. So but that all goes back to Tolkien and what we were talking about, his vision of goodness and virtue.
Well, if you're like me, you're always on the lookout for a good cup of coffee. I'd like to tell you about Red Bike Coffee Company. They are a locally owned coffee company in Irondale, Alabama. Each blend that they produce is expertly roasted in small batches to maintain quality and consistency, and to ensure that you receive the freshest coffee possible. Try one of Red Bike's various blends today and receive 15% off by mentioning Reading for the Glory when you place your order. Visit their online shop at redbikecoffee.com or click the link in today's show notes. So let's get a controversial question out of the way at the start. All right. So some people might have a different opinion on this, and I'm interested to get your opinion. So the book is in 3 parts. Is it one novel in 3 parts, or is it 3 separate books?
Yeah, it's one novel. It's one story. I mean, I don't know what anybody else says and I don't really care, but it's one story. That's what it is to me. It's when I say the best book in the world outside the Bible, I say it's Lord of the Rings.
There you go. So do you also include The Hobbit in this as part of maybe a 4-part series, or is that
No.
Okay?
No,
You sound
sorry,
very
man.
adamant about that.
I read The Hobbit one time, and I don't have any desire to read it again. Maybe I will one day, but I remember vividly not enjoying that near as much as Lord of the Rings. So I get that it's a classic. I get that it's still Tolkien, but no, I don't read The Hobbit regularly at all.
Definitely still part of the Middle Earth universe, and there's parts of the Hobbit that kind of come into play in the Lord of the Rings, but you don't necessarily have to have read the Hobbit to understand the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, sure, right.
So yeah, it's good. Yeah. So in your article, let's dive into your article, why you should read and reread the Lord of the Rings. You bring out 5 ways that or 5 reasons that people should read and reread the Lord of the Rings. You first off say your first reason is to get happy, and I love that. To get happy. So how does the Lord of the Rings make you happy, and how can it make other readers of the book happy?
Yeah, I think this might be Tolkien's greatest strength as a writer. I've never seen a writer that can make me happy like he does. So like for me, I don't know if everybody else is like this, but for me, when I wanna watch a movie that makes me happy, it's going to be either Lord of the Rings or Lonesome Dove. Those are like my comfort movies, if you will. And when it comes to a book, it's Lord of the Rings every time. I can go back to Lord of the Rings anytime, and it's something about the writing. I noted in that there's a crescendo, there's an explosion of happiness during the final 6 chapters that you haven't got to yet. You're about to read those. I mean, it's just happiness all over the place for an extended period of time, which you hardly ever find in a book. But it's all throughout the story too. Like you might remember this one part. One of my favorite parts is early on in the first book when Frodo's about to leave. He thinks he's about to leave the other 3 hobbits, and he's like preparing to break their hearts with the news and to shock them with the news too. And when he goes to tell them, the other 3 are they're like, yeah, we know, we already know, and we've already planned to come with you. And you can tell he's just like he's so relieved and happy and, almost in tears at this unexpected blessing. And you feel that as a reader, you feel happy with him. Um, and it makes you think back to times in your life when you've had those unexpected blessings from, good friends. And so Tolkien's wonderful about that. He's just so good at least for me, I making me consistently happy as I read that. And I don't remember saying that about hardly any other book. And so I think that might be his greatest strength as a writer.
No, that is so true. And I think, there's little pockets of happiness throughout, whether it's the hobbits sitting down after the desecration of the destruction of Isengard, and they're eating a meal, and they're having their pipes, and they're just sitting around like guys at a campfire, just enjoying each other's company.
Oh,
Even just
there's all kinds of those times sitting down to a
absolutely.
meal. I mean,
Yep.
how many times in these stories are they sitting down to a meal? And that's happiness. That's a picture of happiness.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And even one of the most famous lines from the movie is in the book. I was so glad to see it, where Sam goes, potatoes.
Yes.
So yeah, that gets you excited as well. But even just experiencing, even in the midst of great darkness, as Sam and Frodo are continuing their journey into the land of Mordor, you see their friendship brings you happiness as well, as they engage with one another. And even in places where there's potential loss, where Sam thinks he's going to lose Frodo after he gets killed by the spider. Or supposedly, he thinks he gets killed by the spider, Shelob. And so, I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Yes.
And so when he realizes that he's not dead but alive, you sense that happiness of the kind of the renewal of their friendship there.
Yeah, and the friendship, let's just talk about that for a moment, because I think at its core, this movie is really a movie about friendship.
Yes.
And people have asked often, who's the true hero of Lord of the Rings? And I think when you really stop to think about it, it's Sam. Sam is the true hero of the whole thing. And over
You
and over again,
spoiled the ending. That was my last question, man.
oh gosh, sorry. I maybe that's what made me think of that. I'm sorry. Um, but the idea of him and him and Sam's friendship being the center of all of this, kind of building out from the friendship of the four hobbits. But you've got it all over the place. You've got the building friendship between Gimli and Legolas. You've got all kinds of little things like this, and it's really just a book about friendship. And it was not too long ago, I was preaching a sermon on friendship from the Bible, based on Jonathan and David and their friendship, and I was kind of trying to bring in a book on friendship from someone that we've reviewed on Reading for the Glory. Rebecca McLaughlin wrote a really good book on friendship, No Greater Love. But it just made me realize, like, I didn't even know it, but I'm like addicted to stories and movies about friendship. You've got Frodo and Sam, you've got Woody and Buzz. I love Toy Story. You've got Lonesome Dove. It's just a story about two guys that are friends. You've got Sherlock Holmes and John Watson. I'm just over and over again, I find myself going back to these stories about friendship. And that's what Lord of the Rings is at its heart. It's just a book about friendship.
Well, let's tease that out a little bit as we continue. Is that something that's missing in our current culture? Is deep friendship like that? And you think that's why we long for it in our books and movies and shows? Or do you think it's kind of, giving a reproduction of the current culture? Or do you think it's showing something missing?
I think it's showing something missing, or at least that's how I connect to it. And I came to realize this actually. So this is a tangent, but it's related. So have you seen Tombstone, the movie?
Yes,
Okay. So
absolutely.
I
Say
think,
when.
yeah, I think, Doc Holliday is just, he gets all the great lines in that movie, but I think the greatest line in any movie ever for me is when they're down at the creek and Wyatt Earp has just done that thing where he waltzed out in the middle of the gunfire and just said, no, no, and then they go back after that, and Doc Holliday's coughing up a lung, And one of the guys with him, he's like, "Doc, why are you out here doing this? You need to be at home in bed." And he says, "Because Wyatt Earp is my friend." And the guy says, "Well, gosh, I got lots of friends." And he just responds by saying, "I don't." And that hits me like a ton of bricks every time. And I tried to ask myself, why am I being put to tears every time he says that? And it's because, sometimes in pastoral ministry, it's hard to make close friends. It's hard for me to find really close friends that I can connect with, that I don't think have any kind of other agenda or whatever. I can just be myself around, because I'm always trying to be people's pastor. And so I think that's why I'm connecting to Lord of the Rings and all these other stories, is because I see something missing in my own life. But I also think it's a mark of our society. Perhaps it's a mark of where I am in life. I'm 40. I've got 2 kids. Uh, I remember having a lot of close friends in college, but not so much now. That's just the season of life that we're in, probably. But that's one of the reasons I resonate so much with that story, and the friendship aspect of it is because it's missing, at least for me. So maybe that's the way it is for other people. I don't know.
No, I think that's a great point, and I think that's even one of sociologists and cultural commentators talk about loneliness being a growing, wouldn't say pandemic, but an epidemic in our modern culture. Even as we connect over video screen, there's something missing there that you don't get when you're like you do when you meet in person. And so I think there's something about the connecting with another human being over a meal, over a conversation.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons the
Yeah,
local church is so essential, right? To
amen,
be a part of a
amen,
church family.
amen. And so, yeah, I think because Tolkien was one who had great friends, not only famously C.S. Lewis, but others, Charles Williams and others. The names can't come to my head at the moment, but he had great friends, and so I think that the Inklings, kind of the hobbits, are kind of they're kind of the embodiment of the Inklings, if you will. And so yeah, I think that's a good point as we think about the Lord of the Rings and friendship and modern culture. Well, the second thing you talk about in your article is, as somebody reads through the Lord of the Rings, you say that as they read through it, they're experiencing beautiful writing. You've kind of touched on that a little bit, but kind of talk about that a little more, about how the Lord of the Rings and Tolkien's prose and even his poetry is beautiful writing.
Yeah, one of the things that you'll notice if you're a reader is that every now and then you can read a book by someone and the story's like not even much of a story, but you love reading that book. Why do you love reading that book? A lot of times it's because that person is a great writer, the author is, and his writing is so enjoyable to read. And so I remember there's a Christian book that came out. I think it was maybe a year and a half ago or so, by a guy named Alan Levi, and the book was Theo of Golden. Have you read this?
No.
Um, that story is beautiful, but it's the writing. It's the man's writing that it's wonderful to read what's coming out of his mind and out of his heart, and his prose. So Tolkien's like that. He can just write in such a beautiful way. So my favorite part in all the books is a part you've already read. It's a part in the first of the three, and it's when they're leaving Lorien. They're leaving the forest of Lorien to go down the river. And it's when Galadriel's giving gifts to everyone and she comes to Gimli. Her interaction with Gimli right there, I think, is the most beautiful writing in the world. It brings me to tears every time I read it. And so I'd encourage people to go read just that part, but it'll make a bigger difference if you have the story behind it, if you've read from the beginning up till that point. But boy, that brings me to tears every time. I included a few sentences from the third book in that article that I wrote that was just beautiful prose. And I said, if I could write like that, I mean, I wouldn't have to work anymore. He's just a wonderful writer. So it makes it enjoyable to read. It's not hard. There are parts in Lord of the Rings that some people find difficult to get through. He'll go on little rants describing something, or I always like to say that just like if you're trying to read through the Bible, the place where it's tough to get through is Leviticus and Numbers. If you start from the beginning, in the same way, if you're reading through Lord of the Rings, you got to push through the Council of Elrond chapter. That's where a lot of people give it up. And it's got a lot of neat history, but it's kind of nerdy and it's really long. The chapter's really long. And you got to push through that one to get to the rest of the stuff. So there are places that are a little bit difficult for some people, but his writing is itself is not difficult at all. It's beautiful.
And I think that's because, you talk about how earlier, how he is not being, he's not being a facsimile of his current culture. And I think that's because Tolkien, not only he wasn't writing in our current culture, he was writing 50, 75 years ago, but he was also writing a deeper tale that comes out of the history of English literature, much akin to Beowulf or the Canterbury Tales and those kind of medieval stories. And so I think that's why his writing is so beautiful. It's because he's writing not for his own time and not even for future time, but I think he's even including the past in his writing as well, trying to draw all of history together in his writing. And so I think that's why he's drawing on the great tradition of English writing and English literature as he's putting together his story.
Yeah, and just I mean, some people have a gift from the Lord too. It was crazy that him and Lewis were friends because them two are just generational talents in writing and in being able to express their thought with words. But it also it's more than just the talent. It's he has the ability to put his heart on the page, and that's where you really get the emotion coming through and the depth of some of the joy and some of the sadness and all that stuff. So his heart comes out, which means you read through Lord of the Rings and you're like, this man. Just like when I read through that book Theo of Golden, you just start to think this man who wrote this book, he has a beautiful heart. He's somebody I would really love to sit down and to get to know.
And he would be well above my my IQ, but
Oh gosh, like oh
yes,
my
yeah.
goodness, like all the stuff he did to create this whole language and this whole story and this whole history. I mean, that just takes a mind that the Lord gave him something that the rest of us don't have.
I think somebody that is similar. He's an American author, and as of this recording, he's still alive. And you love him as well as Wendell Berry.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
he doesn't create the languages, obviously, because he's just writing in English for an English speaking culture and writing about an English speaking culture. But I think just the fact that he was able to create Port William and the characters of Port William and the storylines and the history and the genealogies and all the back things that go, I think that's very similar to the Lord of the Rings. Maybe not quite on the same level, but very, very similar, particularly in our modern context.
Yeah, and there's another one that you're reading his books and you're like, I don't even care where this story goes. I just want to read what he's writing. This story really isn't there. There's not a huge plot. There's not something to wait to be revealed at the end. But I mean, just love reading what he writes and his insight into humanity.
Absolutely. We kind of talked about this kind of at the beginning of our conversation, but let's talk about it a little bit more. You say number 3, to see the best in humanity. So let's talk about that a little deeper. How does Lord of the Rings show us the best of humanity?
Yeah. So on that note, sometimes every now and then I'll talk to somebody who says like, no, I don't want to get into Lord of the Rings because I don't like fantasy stuff. And they think about it in terms of like the way that sometimes I might think of Dungeons and Dragons or like Magic the Gathering, like, okay, I'm a nerd, but there's a line that I don't cross. Right. Some people think about it like that, but Lord of the Rings is not a book for people who love mythology and nerd fantasy. It's a book for people who want to see the best in humanity. And so if like we talked about already, if you love friendship, this book is going to speak to that in a wonderful and deep way. The themes all throughout of courage and self-sacrifice and chivalry that we don't have in our modern
There's a
culture.
word.
And yeah, and integrity, mercy, honor, all of that stuff you see in this book. It's a book about the characters, and that means it's a book about being human the way that the Lord created us to be, and virtue and sin and all of that stuff. So that's really what I see is, Tolkien puts on display the virtues of humanity, the way the Lord meant for us to be. And I put in that article, when I read Lord of the Rings, I think about Philippians 4:8, where it says, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. And Lord of the Rings is about that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
It's the best in humanity. So it's not it's not a book really about wizards and elves and dwarves. It's a book about humanity.
Can't forget hobbits now.
Yeah, and Hobbit. Yeah, all these just
Right.
weird fantasy characters. It's a book
Absolutely.
about the best in humanity.
Absolutely. No, I would totally agree. Absolutely. And you see in the different characters these different aspects of honor, goodness, truth, chivalry, and it draws you out to be a better person yourself, I think, and that's always a good thing.
Yes, absolutely.
And so the fourth thing you talk about is, and for Lord of the Rings is a global phenomenon. It is far reaching, well beyond the Christian subculture and even just the global Christian culture. But you say number four that it stirs our longing for heaven. And so it may not necessarily do that in people who aren't thinking about heaven in the way that someone who is a Christian would think about heaven. But Tolkien, as we mentioned, he was a very devout Christian, particularly a devout Catholic Christian. And so he was definitely thinking about heaven. And so how does Lord of the Rings stir your affection for heaven?
Yeah, so I mean, if you've been seeing it, if you anybody who reads through Lord of the Rings, you're going to get those Christian themes coming through over and over again, and I think it's a wonderful tool to kind of through the side door introduce Christian values to people who are not Christians that might love the story and read it. But so you've got the place where the elves go. They're going in the middle, but at the very end, especially the place where the elves go. What is it called? The Grey Havens. That's really the heaven idea, the eternal life place that Tolkien puts into his story. But there's a part toward the end after the climax, and I mean, I don't want to give a spoiler for anybody, but this is a pretty well-known story at this point. But after the climax, Sam says, in kind of his overflowing joy, he says, "Is everything sad going to come untrue?" And beginning with that begins my favorite part of the book, which is actually everything after the climax, and it's all about Tolkien tying up all the loose ends and everybody's stories in such a way that it just gives you such joy, and it stays there. It's not like most authors can get you up to that point for maybe a couple pages or a page, and then you're down again. I mean, Tolkien keeps you there for chapters on end in this joyful wrapping up of everything, and then it's just. I think what he was doing, I don't know this for a fact, but I think what he was doing is he was saying, all this resolution at the end, this is what heaven is going to be. This is what eternal life is going to be. It's going to be the resolution of all things, the tying up of all storylines, the fulfillment of all of our longings, and everything sad is going to come untrue. And so all of that part of the book after the climax, after the climactic moment in the story, I love that more than anything else in the whole book. And I think that's what Tolkien's doing through that part, is that whole part, not just with the Grey Havens, but through that whole part. He's showing us this is what God is intending to do with the new heavens and the new earth. He's wrapping up everything. He's giving us such joy. And so all of that, when I read that part especially, it makes me long for the day when the Lord will do that.
No, that's such a great point. And you bring out, even in modern TV shows and that sort of thing, even sometimes in movies, the person who's longing for, whether it's the love or they're looking for one particular thing in the story, when they get it, they lose it not long after.
Yeah. Yeah.
They find the husband or the wife or the friend, and then it's back down again, and they're having to chase after something else. And so
Right.
I think you're right. And I haven't gotten there in the book, but just in the movie, it is resonates that way. And so I would agree with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, the movie recreated that in a good way. It's even more so in the book, and there are some wonderful surprises there at the very end that you'll see that you weren't expecting. But it's just it that section after the climax. I think that's the the most enjoyable and sustained extended reading that I've ever experienced in reading anything.
Well, I will be on the lookout for that and look forward to it with anticipation as I get closer to that. So the last thing you talk about, the fifth reason that you give, is that outside of the Bible, The Lord of the Rings is the best book ever written. Why do you make that claim?
Well, probably because I haven't read more books. Maybe there's a whole bunch of books out there that I haven't read, so other people could say something else. But there's no way I will ever find a book that resonates with me like this, that speaks to me like this, that I want to read over and over and over again, like Lord of the Rings. Um, and if I will, that'll be fun. But I don't see it ever happening. Um, I I really do actually think the movies are the best movies ever made. They're my favorite movies in all the world, but the book even more so. So the Bible is the most important book in the whole world. The Bible is the best book in the whole world. It's straight from the Lord. You know, outside the Bible, Lord of the Rings is my favorite piece of writing. Period. No matter what it is, fiction, nonfiction, anything. And I will keep coming back to it. I've reread it more than any other book. And I think I'll just continue to do it for the rest of my life. And I think a lot of other people experience the same thing. So uh, I might not have the perspective to really say that, but I mean, I don't ever see there being another book that will hit me like this one.
Yeah, I think that's good and very well put. Um, and so, speaking of the movies, you talk about the movies being the best movies ever produced. Um, how do you think that the movies stack up to the books?
Oh, so yeah, I actually really, really enjoy them. I wonder, I wonder if this might help some people. What was nice for me was I saw the movies first, so when I read the books, when I met Aragorn in the books, I had the picture of Viggo Mortensen in my head, and his voice, and that sometimes makes it easier. Like if you do that with Lonesome Dove came from a book written by Larry McMurtry. But if you watch the miniseries first, then you're reading the books, and one of the most enjoyable parts of that is you've got Robert Duvall and Tommy Lee Jones's voices going back and forth in your head as you're reading the books, and it's really fun. So that can be an argument for watching the movies first and then going to the books. It can make it a little bit easier. You don't have to create all that story in your head. The books had to change some things. The books had to leave some things out. We talked about, Tom Bombadil's not in the movies,
Yep.
or the movies had to. Did I say the
Right.
books? The
Right.
movies had to leave things out. They had to change some things. So, but you understand the decisions that they made. Like they had to leave Tom Bombadil out because, as really intriguing of a couple chapters that is, it just does not drive the main storyline any closer to the finish. And you've only got so much you can put in a movie. So they had to change some things with Saruman. You'll see that. And, so I think they did a great job, though. They did a wonderful job. It was one of those things that people kept saying this will never be able to be done. You can never put this on film because of the complexity, because of the dividing storylines in the middle. They'll just never be able to do it. And I think they did it about as well as you could. And the thing I am just most thankful for over and over again is how they stayed true to Tolkien's vision of things. They didn't try to put their own agenda into the movie. We've got leave our agenda out of it. We're going to make this we're going to make this feel like the books feel. And that is probably the most difficult thing you could have done with a movie. And they got that right. And if you get that right, and then you get so many other things right, like the choreography or or the cinematography or the music. Oh my God, the music, or the casting, all of these things they got so right. So just put it all together. To me, it's the greatest. It's the greatest feat in cinema history.
No, I would totally agree. And it took the better part of a decade to film or something like that, or maybe not.
I don't think. I think they filmed continuously. I used to be
Maybe.
up on all the trivia and stuff because I used to watch all those behind the scenes special feature stuff. Um, I was I was I was thinking they filmed for a couple years straight, and it was a couple years straight because they actually decided we're just going to film straight through. Um, I don't remember though.
You
I
almost have to though to tell the story correctly, because otherwise it kind of gets choppy and
and
things may not.
to
Yep.
keep all the actors, like, I mean, these are people that have other things to do in their lives or want to get other contracts, and so you got to keep all the actors and stuff. That's the hard part about some of these long running TV shows.
No, that's true. But I would agree. The movies are very well done. I've not watched the extended editions. I need to go back and watch the
Oh,
extended editions.
that's like the only ones you should watch.
Okay, that's good.
They have some things in it you'll miss, like totally. You've got to watch the extended editions; they're great.
Yeah. Well, that'll be the next on my list. After I finish, I'll watch the extended editions. How about that?
Nice, yeah.
Finish reading the book, I should say. But yeah, I think you're right. And even though they are 20 some odd years old, they're still very good movies.
Well, yeah, it
And
doesn't feel
very
like it at all.
no, it does not.
Kind of like Wizard of Oz does not feel like it was made in 1939.
That's right. No, you're
It
right.
does not feel like
Absolutely.
that. But
Yep.
there is a timeless quality to the way they did Lord of the Rings, and you know what? The way they did the Hobbit movies is not like that. They don't
You're
have
right.
that.
You're
There's
right.
something about them. Maybe it's the use of CGI or whatever, but or maybe it's taking one book and squeezing out 3 movies from it.
That's
Um,
true.
but it's
That's another topic for another day, I think.
cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. Just see the dollar signs in our heads. But Lord of the Rings was, man, it just felt like they did it right. It was pure. It was it, anytime they ever try to remake it in the future, I'll be against it on principle.
I know. I think, and you make a great point. It's like they took each of the 3 books, and they could only put so much into each movie, and they had to leave a lot of stuff out. And then with the Hobbit, it's one book that's not even the full size of one of the Lord of the Rings books, and they squeezed out three movies into that. I mean, they're not bad movies, the Hobbit movies,
Nah,
but they're
but
not on the same level. You're right.
it's a
Yeah,
little bit of a
absolutely.
money grab.
No, you're totally right. Totally right. So as we wrap up, a couple more questions, and then we'll wrap up our conversation today. But before we do that, is there anything else you would like to hit that we haven't hit on before we kind of
Oh
start wrapping
gosh,
up?
I could talk about Lord of the Rings all day long. There probably is, but having you prod me is helpful. So if I think of something, I'll chase a rabbit trail or
Well,
whatever. But
we'll let this be one of the prods. What is or who is your favorite character in the entire series?
so it's either Aragorn or Sam. That's just I love Aragorn. Aragorn's like the one that I'm immediately drawn to every time. Um, he's the true leader of all of this. But Sam is the one that brings me to tears. Sam is the one that um, maybe Aragorn's the ideal, but maybe I'll never be like Aragorn. But maybe I can be like Sam. Maybe I can do my little part to be a friend to someone, and maybe that will end up making a bigger difference than I ever dreamed of. That's Sam. Um, he's just a loyal friend. So it's one of those two. It's those two together. Kind of, I have to say both of them.
I think that's a good answer, and I would say Sam, like you're saying, because I resonate with Sam, and I have foibles in my life like Sam, even unintentionally, make mistakes and go down paths that you not need to go down. But I think Sam is very relatable
Yeah. And
in that area.
his courage his courage is even more powerful than the courage of Aragorn. Aragorn's got courage, but Aragorn's got these like natural gifts that mortal men don't have. Sam is courageous in the face of dangers that are much more imposing than anything that he can muster up. But he'll do anything. He'll do anything to protect Frodo. He'll do anything to to make sure that his friend is okay. And so and the idea over and over again, the idea of having to leave Frodo just almost kills him. So it's I hope I can be a friend like that to someone. I hope maybe I can be a follower of Jesus like that. Um, so it's some wonderful symbolism there in friendship and humanity. One thing we haven't talked about is the symbolism of the ring. The ring is just the perfect symbol for sin in all the different ways that it grabs a hold of people, that it twists people's minds. It talks about Gollum and even Bilbo and Frodo later. They love and hate it at the same time. It's just that's a whole nother theme. We didn't even talk about that, but that's a great analogy from Tolkien there for the ring is a picture of sin.
So as we talk about, of course, you mentioned the ring itself, the ring of power, the one ring to rule them all. That's the premise of the whole story. And but that one character that you just mentioned, we haven't mentioned up until this point, and that is Gollum or Smeagol.
Yeah, yeah,
I love throughout the book you're talking about the goodness and the truth of the book that come out of the book, and the chivalry. I love how Frodo treats Gollum.
yeah, yeah,
Sam, even though he's the one that you're talking about that's very loyal to Frodo, he can't stand the ground that Gollum walks on.
and
But
Sam sees him for who he is.
right,
Sam can see
absolutely
him in a way that Frodo can't.
right.
And
But
yet at the same time, Frodo can see him in a way that Sam can't.
that's correct. And Frodo is so kind and so gracious when he should have let Gollum go, and just let him be what he needs to be. He continually draws him in. It's almost like he's trying to save him. But it's a good analogy, I think, that if there's maybe that friend that we want to bring to Christ, and we try over and over and over again to bring them to Christ, we can only bring them so far, and they have to make that decision for themselves. We can't take them any further than to introduce them to Christ, because ultimately we see that Frodo is trying to almost bring him back from his darkness and the depth of his depravity, to bring him back to the Smeagol he was before. But he is so far gone that he can't do it. But I love the tenderness there that he treats Gollum with.
Yeah, and ultimately, Frodo's wrong on that. He ends up being wrong. He can't. He Gollum is a villain. Really, the ring has destroyed any of the goodness within him. Sam sees that, but what Sam couldn't know, what no one could have known, is something that Gandalf actually says at one point to Frodo, or maybe I think he actually says it to Pippin in the books. At one point, he says something to the effect of, let me find it. Oh yeah, he says, "Let us remember that a traitor may betray himself and do good that he does not intend." And you get this theme coming through all throughout, but it just really takes a crescendo at the end. Okay, so now I'm going to have to do spoiler alert, but the ring would not have been destroyed if it weren't for Gollum. They would have never found the right path if it weren't for Gollum, but the ring itself would not have actually ended up getting destroyed if it weren't for Gollum, even in his twisted selfishness. And all of that, goes back to what Gandalf says to Frodo initially is like, if it weren't for the mercy and the pity of Bilbo, that pity might be what ends up turning this whole thing into, what might end up saving us all. And that's actually what happens. But it's the same thing with Frodo. The pity of Frodo, saves everyone. And it's not because he saves Gollum and Gollum becomes good again. It's because Gollum, accidentally helps, and they wouldn't have gotten to the end, and they wouldn't have actually destroyed the ring if it weren't for Gollum doing what he did at the very end there.
Well, I'm going to push back on you a little bit regarding your not dislike, but the less, how you think a little bit less of The Hobbit as opposed to The Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
There is where you find the full backstory. I know it's briefly mentioned in the first book, but you find the full backstory of how Bilbo finds the ring and all the interaction there with him and Gollum. And so yeah, I do think that it plays an important role in the whole story. I would agree that it's not a part of the three, but it is an important prequel, if you will, to the whole
my
story.
hang up on that one is always The Hobbit has always felt like a kid's book to me, whereas Lord of the Rings has felt like a story for adults too. And so
Fair point.
That's just my feel. Like, it's a more serious, it's a better story, The Lord of the Rings, and then The Hobbit's kind of just like, hey, this is something good for us to read in 6th grade or whatever.
No, that's a fair point. But yeah, I think it's helpful to read both. As you go. So we talk about your favorite characters. What is your favorite? You've talked about different scenes throughout the conversation today. What would be your favorite scene or sequence, either in the book or from the movies?
So I mean, just in the books, it's my favorite part. Small part is that part with Gimli and Galadriel in the book. So interestingly enough, two characters that they're not my favorites or anything, but boy, that piece of writing. I mean, if I even read that out to you right now, I would start tearing up. So that's just for anybody looking for that one. That's in the Farewell to Lorien chapter in the first book, and boy, it is absolutely wonderful. It's just some of my favorite parts. I mentioned I love the part where Frodo, the hobbits, Frodo thinks he's leaving them, and then they tell him, no, we're all going with you, and we already know. Sam's been telling us this whole time. He's been informing on you, and Frodo's like, I can't decide whether to be mad or to hug you or whatever. It's wonderful. That's a great part. And then all of the parts at the end, the falling action. I mean, you've got 2 chapters there in a row called The Field of Cornwall and The Steward of the King. That just those 2 chapters together are just some of the most enjoyable sustained reading you'll ever read. You will. I think you'll really love. There's a love story that comes into play after the ring is destroyed, and it's a wonderful part of that portion afterward. It's really neat. So yeah, I bet there are some more that I could mention. I could go on and on, but if I had to pick one part of the books that is my favorite part of the books, it'd be that interaction between Gimli and Galadriel. Love it.
So this is the last question I'm going to ask, and we've already talked about it. You've already answered it, but I want you to flesh it out a little bit. You talked about the true hero of the story being Sam, and I think that I would totally agree with you on that, and I think that many people that are experts, that are more than experts than we are, would agree with you as well. Why is Sam the hero of the story?
Yeah, I mean, your obvious answers would be Frodo or Aragorn or even Gandalf, but it's Sam, and it's always been Sam. This is a movie really about Sam and his friendship. One thing I didn't mention before that I love, in the movies, every movie at some point ends with Frodo looking at Sam and saying, "I'm glad you're with me." And that was just perfect. I mean, just perfect. It's a, ending to all 3 of them. And it's because, yeah, that's what this is all about. Sam refusing to let go, Sam refusing to go back, Sam refusing to give in to fear. Sam would do anything and give anything if it was for Frodo. And that's why in the movies, I tear up so bad at the end when when they've just destroyed the ring and everything's exploding and they're sitting there and Sam starts crying because he's never going to be able to get married to Rosie. He's never going to be able to experience all that. He's given up everything for Frodo. he's given up everything. And Frodo looks over and he's like, Frodo has that realization, like, Sam's given up just as much as me here. And so it really is about Sam and his friendship and his loyalty to Frodo, and he'll do anything for Frodo. And so without Sam, just like without Gollum, it would never happen. Without Sam, it would have never happened. And so that's, to me, Sam is the real center of the story, the real hero. It's really, you could say in a sense he's the main character. And the movies end with his face, and him being home, and it's perfect.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, John, thank you for joining me today, and coming back on the Reading for the Glory podcast. It was an honor and a privilege to have you, and I had a great conversation with you, and definitely going to have you back on soon.
Yeah, anytime, brother. And of course, if it's coming on to talk Lord of the Rings, I'm game on that. This was fun.
Absolutely. Well, I'll be sure to have a link. I'll have a link to a couple of your books as well, so people can find you as an author, but I'll be sure to have a link to the Lord of the Rings as well, so people can, and I'll have a link to your article as well, so people can read your article and find that as well. Well, for our listeners, if you have a question or a comment, or would simply like to drop us a note, I would encourage you to check us out. We're on social media. We're on Facebook, X, Instagram, and Threads. If you'd like to email us, you can do that at readingfortheglory.com/contact. I would encourage you to check out our website, readingfortheglory.com, to stay up to date on our latest book reviews, articles, and podcast episodes. And we would encourage you to subscribe wherever you're listening to this podcast. And as we would say now, watching this podcast, because we are on YouTube, and we'd love for you to subscribe and share this material wherever you're listening to it. And we hope you enjoy it. If you would like to support the show, whether it be monthly to receive the free book as a thank you, or just a one-time gift, we'd love for you to do that. You can go to support the show link at the bottom of the show notes, and you can support the show that way. Well, we thank you again for joining us today on the Reading for the Glory podcast, and we look forward to having you join us again next time as we discover truth, goodness, and beauty through the written word.